friends. Sorry I'm late. I have kids on spring break and a son with track practice in the morning, and so my times this week are a little bit wacky. Welcome. Thanks for joining in. Welcome, replay viewers. Glad you are joining in as well. Hello. If you are new, I would love it if you, I'm glad you caught me live too. Put your name in a comment so I can start associating your name with your username. I am Melissa from MakerySpace.com, where I love to educate and equip Etsy sellers with more left-brained aspects of running a creative business. Okay, I'm writing down some of these names. Okay. So I'm going to kind of just shoot from the hip today. I don't have a written agenda, but there's something that I have had on my, just kind of floating around in my brain and really been processing a lot for the last week or so. Oh, Mandy, that is a new picture. It looks good. And especially over the last 24 hours, I've been thinking about it a lot more and thinking this would be something that would be good to talk about, because I think it's something that we wonder at some point as shop owners or in our business in general, just wondering how do we know who to listen to? How do we know whose advice is valid? Who is experienced enough to be sharing it? How do we know when advice is bad? Do we just, oh, by the way, look at the cupcakes. I did the Periscope hashtag because Periscope's birthday was like March 26th, I think. So we get cupcakes. I just thought that would be fun. Anyway, sometimes it's hard to know who to listen to. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and share like some of my criteria that I use, and maybe you can add some of your own. One thing I will not be doing is I will not be calling out any names of anybody you shouldn't listen to. That is not my style. I just want to kind of equip you with some things to look for, especially in particular since I do Etsy scopes, in particular when it comes to Etsy. Like, who do you listen to as far as who knows about the ins and outs of Etsy, about SEO, about proper procedures, what's allowed and what's not allowed, all that kind of stuff. Do you just take people's word for it because they say that they're an expert? Or is there more to it than that? So I've seen a really big trend over the past couple of years of people wanting to sell services for SEO and especially for Etsy. And I've noticed that people sometimes when they start, they don't even have a shop, or they'll start a shop at the same time. Let me tell you something about myself. I don't sell on Shopify. Okay, I've only sold on Etsy. So that is why I talk about Etsy, because I have experience with Etsy. Now, my personality type is that I can find the answers to questions really, really easily and really, really well. That is just how my brain works. So if you were to ask me some questions about selling on Shopify, I can just about guarantee I could answer them after looking into it for you pretty adequately. But I am not ever going to start posting about how to sell on Shopify or doing any kind of advice giving or scope about selling on Shopify unless I were to open a shop and sell on there for a while. That's just my personal conviction that I'm not going to, just because I'm able to gain the information through a third party or from investigating myself, I am just not going to put myself out there as someone who knows about Shopify. So that is just something that I won't do. Just for the sake of possibly getting more followers or possibly being able to sell some kind of a service or something. But I see that being done a lot. So I think that some of the things that you should look for when you're looking at who to listen to as far as an Etsy seller about what they know, I think first of all, have they had a shop for a while? Really, I think that's the main criteria that you should look at, because there's only so much you can learn through a third party and present to other people without experiencing it yourself as a shop owner who's using the platform every single day. So that's the first criteria. So like when I see someone like doing a webinar or a blog post or anything about Etsy, especially when I was first really learning the most, I would always look at their shop. And if I couldn't find a shop, or their shop was like, a month old or something, I'd be like, this probably isn't the best source for me. It doesn't mean I don't know what they're talking about at all. So don't hear that from me. I'm not saying that people have no ability to know anything about Etsy if they haven't been selling, hey Brooke, for several years on there. I'm not saying that at all. But you at least have to have a shop. And I would even go so far as to say you need to currently have an active shop. If I stopped selling on Etsy today, or I decided to not focus on my shop at all, and I completely set up a shop on Shopify, and that's where all my energy went, I would not continue to blog and scope about Etsy. I would not feel like I could authentically do that because I am not in there every day working with the platform and dealing with the changes and seeing how they affect my shop. And I would not feel like I would have integrity to be providing information to you when I was not working with it on a daily basis. So I really think having an active shop is important, and I have seen some bad advice given by people who maybe used to sell on Etsy and no longer have an active shop or have not been there for very long. Now, there are like 1 or 2 exceptions in my mind of people who may not have Etsy as their focus, who, I'll read their blog posts and I'll listen to them, and I haven't found anything I'm like, whoa, where I'd warn somebody away. But that is a really, really rare exception to that. So I think that having an active shop is important. But someone does not have to have been selling on Etsy for years. There are people who just pour themselves into learning something that could have been selling there for a year and really know a lot and have been able to experiment with things and try things out. So that it doesn't have to be a certain number of years, I don't think. Just actively involved with the platform. But I think really the most important thing is that you just can't take everything you hear as gospel. I hope that anything I tell you, you are finding other things to back it up before you just take it hook, line, and sinker and go for it. I am not offended at all if you go try to, if there's something I say and you're like, I'm not quite sure about that, and you go try to dig for the information elsewhere. I hope that you do that. Don't be a sheeple. Don't just take what I hear. Yeah, in all areas of life. I'm a Christian, and when I go to church, I highly respect my pastor. I believe that he check it against things. So there's other places, you could look in the Etsy handbook, the seller handbook, for information to back up what you're hearing. But I'm really big on linking to proof of what I'm sharing or giving examples of things that I've done that back up what I'm telling you. But some people just spew information without backing it up. And so I think that's another thing you look for. I had posted, there was something in an Etsy group that I'm part of where someone had said that every business, when they register, is required to get an EIN, and that you can't do business without it, and that you can't register a trade name without it, which is not true. A sole proprietor does not have to have an EIN unless they have employees. So I just mentioned that. And then I also ended up linking to the exact spot on the IRS's site that says that. And I was accused of giving bad tax advice, that I'd better meet with a professional because I'm giving bad tax advice. And so I'm thinking that's funny to me because I'm so careful to link to the proof. And but this person was not even going to take that as the proof. It was her opinion overrode that, So just be careful that you're listening to people who can actually back up what they're saying with evidence from their own shop or from Etsy's handbook or something, that kind of thing. Okay. So yeah, the IRS was totally wrong. I don't know what they were thinking when they put that on their site because this gal knew what she was talking about. So I guess I just want to encourage you to maybe not just follow one person's advice. I think it's good to be listening to different people who are talking about selling on Etsy so that you can kind of compare and go, okay, am I hearing this same thing ring true? Because if you're not comparing, then you're not going to know when there's something erroneous and have it like send up a red flag in your head. Okay, so be listening to several people, be checking it against what Etsy's saying, although, yeah, Etsy forums are a great place to get a lot of incorrect info, and I'm going to talk about that, Sherry. One thing I do want to say is, what Etsy says and what Etsy does are not always exactly the same. So you even want to be careful with that. Even if an Etsy admin says something, watch what actually happens, because it needs to line up before you just go, well, Etsy admin said this. Well, it might not match up to what's actually happening. So, so the forums on Etsy, they can be a great place of support and community, but sometimes I just want to rip my hair out because of what people are sharing. There was actually somebody yesterday who puts themselves forth as an Etsy SEO expert who was, when giving an opinion about this new pattern site that you can do that mirrors your shop, was saying that your shop is buried so deep into Etsy's site that there's no way Google could ever find it. And she gave what the URL would look like. And she was pulling the URL from the preview, not from what your actual shop domain name would be, even if you didn't use your own domain. It would be your shop name. So, for example, if I used pattern without a domain name, it would be atimeforeverything.patternbyetsy.com. That would be my domain if I didn't point a different domain to it. So, like, things like that. And there were people in that post going, oh, thank you so much. I trust you so much. I trust your judgment. I'm so glad you're keeping me from doing this by sharing this information. It's like, it was completely wrong. And of course, my personality is I automatically go to the source code because I'm kind of nerdy like that. I know how to look at the source code of a web page and see things. I know how to go to I went to the Etsy site where they were linking to sample shops, and just by hovering over the link to the sample shop, I could see exactly what the URL was. So there's ways of finding out that information and not just taking someone's word for it, but there are people that are just going to listen to one person and make their decisions based on that, and that is not safe. Don't even do that with me, please. I hope I'm pounding that enough into your head that I am capable of making mistakes and giving you wrong information, and I want you to check it out to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. But with this whole thing with the pattern by Etsy, which I'm actually in the middle of writing a blog post about, and so I should have that done and posted by the end of the day. But so people are getting really fired up and ranting and getting emotional about their feelings about it, usually for the negative. And I just think, you know what? It's not productive to just rant about something. And it's people going, well, I already have my own website, so why would I want to do this? Exactly. Why would you want to do it? If you have your own standalone website, there's really no reason for you to consider pattern. And I even saw where Etsy admin had said who they were targeting, that when they had been asking questions of sellers over the course of the last year or whatever, they're targeting sellers who do not feel capable of starting up their own standalone website or don't have the time for it, feel completely overwhelmed by it, and want an option of a URL they can send people to that's not right on Etsy. They have hit their target as far as I'm concerned. Pattern is not for everyone. Pattern might not even be for more than a certain small percentage of sellers on Etsy. But I think people that are considering it feel stupid. Like they're total idiots that they would ever even consider having that for their shop as an option. And for some people in their season of life, it might be exactly what they need so that they can point someone to a different URL where they're not seeing other people's items, where there's not a menu or there's not a search bar to take them away from that shop. It could be just what they need to bridge for this season of their life. It could be something that they will never get away from because they'll never be in a place where they want to do something more. Because I think what people aren't understanding is it gives the option of having that URL and not having people on the whole Etsy website where they're getting distracted by it, but it keeps everything fed through Etsy on the shipping and the orders part. And so if you want a place to send people where they're not going to be looking at your competitors maybe right away, but you know that if you have multiple platforms, you are going to just curl up in a ball in the corner and die, then this could be something that might work for you. But if you're like, I want my own standalone website, I want control over it, I don't mind managing the inventory and the shipping, then don't do it. But I guess don't waste a bunch of time, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here because it sounds like a lot of you understand what I'm saying, but I just wish people, yes, older customers too. There are some older customers who are overwhelmed by technology, and they don't have to do anything different if they just use Pattern for a place that they can send people. But I just wish people wouldn't waste so much energy ranting about it and making other people feel dumb for even considering it, or feel like they don't measure up because they're not going with a complete standalone website. Okay, so my blog post is going to address that. I feel kind of neutral about it in the sense that I'm not pushing anybody to do it, or I'm not going, oh, you need to stay away from it like some people are doing. So I'm just, in my blog post, I created kind of a cool infographic for people can kind of talk themselves through the process of deciding based on their situation. And then I'm just going to share what I see, I've observed as some advantages and disadvantages. And I will tell you, there are a few things that could be advantages because I shared with you how Etsy is no longer using the shop announcement as the meta description for Google. They're saying browse more items from a time for everything on Etsy, blah, 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 that little generic thing for the Google snippet. Where our shop announcement used to show up in the Google snippet for our Etsy shop, it is now being used on Pattern. I looked at the source code for the page. So whatever you have in your shop announcement, if you have a Pattern shop, that will be the snippet on Google. I also did some checking around with the, I'll talk about that, Tracy. I don't feel super qualified. I'll just give you some of my thoughts, but I'm not going to say it's the definite truth. I looked at one of the sample shops and I did some Google searches with one of her keyword phrases to see where her Etsy shop showed up in the Google search results and where her Pattern shop showed up in the Google search results. And because her shop, since she was one of the beta testers, her shop has been up for at least a little while, so I knew Google would have indexed it. And I found that for her, for a main keyword phrase for her shop in general, her Etsy shop was actually number 1 because she's a pretty established shop, has a lot of sales. But her Pattern shop was at the bottom of page 2 in Google search results. And this was for a very basic phrase. It wasn't like a super detailed long tail keyword phrase that would have eliminated a lot of search results. And that's great, Tracy. And then the other thing is I took a phrase from one of her listings itself to see where the listings would show up. And her listing that was on Pattern was actually number 2 in search results, and her Etsy listing was number 8 in search results. So her Pattern shop listing itself was showing up higher. So I think that Etsy might be doing some things on their side with Google SEO that is favoring Pattern shops over just the basic on the Etsy marketplace shop. So that's something else to consider. Not saying necessarily that the SEO for Pattern shops would be better than the SEO like for a Shopify shop or a WooCommerce shop on your website. Not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying comparing Etsy itself to Pattern, it looks like possibly the SEO might end up being better in some cases. Okay? I'll talk about that in the blog post. I didn't really mean to get into all that now. So what I want you to come away with is to always listen with a discerning ear, check people out, check their shops before you go following their advice, especially people that say they are Etsy SEO experts. I'm telling you right now, I will never call myself an Etsy SEO expert. I shouldn't say never. Most likely never. I would have to get a lot farther along before I'd ever call myself that. But there's some people who are really good at writing product descriptions who are also calling themselves Etsy SEO experts. I think that's really, really precarious place to be because there's been more and more shops selling services on Etsy, and I've seen some advice given, some things told like that that Etsy, that your product description factors into Etsy search, which is not true. There are so many things that, oh, that's great. There's so many things that get spread as rumors that are not true. So please take everything I say and everything you hear anybody else say about Etsy, check it against each other, check it against what you've experienced, check it against what you know to be true before you go and change anything or adopt a philosophy or a way of doing things with your own shop. Just be really, really careful and discerning. The transaction fees. So with Pattern basically mirrors your shop. So everything is the same. Whether someone purchases in your Etsy shop or purchases in your Pattern shop, everything goes through the transaction process exactly the same. The fees are the same. It shows up in the same place in your orders, although there's like a little tag that tells you it's a Pattern order. So it's almost like, you know how if in your browser or whatever you can get a different skin, like if you're using Firefox, you can get a different skin so it looks different. It's kind of like that. It is your Etsy shop with a different appearance to the person